Guys, welcome to Wide Awake Radio. I am Charlie McGrath, your host. My website's wideawakenews.com. If you're not one of the 180 people in the chat room, you can go to wideawakenews.com, click on the Wide Awake Radio button, and join them. If you prefer to watch the show live through JTV, there is a feed in the bottom left-hand corner of the chat room. Click on it, wait for 30 seconds, and you will be watching me do this live. I'm very excited. We have Bob Chapman of the International Forecaster on as a guest, as well as Warren Pollock, our normal Monday night co-host. We're going to bring him up in just a second. I want to do a very, very quick review of where we're at. I mean, when Bob comes on a lot of alternative radio shows or media, you know, I know he gets inundated with questions about gold, silver, and more focused in topics. I want to, you know, this is the first time Bob's been on the program. I want to get his overall view. He is a very learned individual. He's been in this industry a long time, and he's been calling a lot of things exactly right. One of the most impressive things that I find about Bob Chapman is even back in 2007, 2008, 2009, there was a lot of people saying this is it. It's going to be martial law in the streets. And I remember when I just started to my foray in alternative media, listening to Bob Chapman say, well, it's going to get bad, but, you know, this has got to happen first. And he's been absolutely right on the money. So he's an icon in alternative media, and I want to get his overview tonight. So I'm going to just give us a brief summary of where we're at right now, and there's no better way to do this than just looking at the headlines. In fact, as I sit down to go on the air tonight, we have 47 million Americans in this nation on food stamps. 47 million American families, according to nationaldebtclock.org. If we do the math on that, times 2.5 kids, that's over a third of this nation requires the U.S. government just to put food on the table. The Federal Reserve came out today and said it's going to be not quarters, not months, but years before we return to any kind of sustainable employment levels once again in this country. We're barely halfway through the year of 2011, and we have 1 million foreclosures in this nation already. And it promises to get nothing but worse from here on out. But in a Bloomberg article today that sums everything up, the trajectory we have been on, the direction we're heading, and who is benefiting, a Bloomberg article today sums it up beautifully. The aristocracy of America would be down the tubes if it wasn't for you and I. If it wasn't for the taxpayers of this country, and the globe for that matter, these aristocracy, these too big to fail, would not be in existence today. It took Bloomberg, a lawsuit, a Freedom of Information Act, and an act of Congress to find out how much money the Federal Reserve lent out to these institutions. I'm not talking about TARP. I'm not talking about the $700 billion con job that the American people were told this is going to be it. I'm talking about the newly released $1.2 trillion of lending that was done by the Federal Reserve. $1.2 trillion. Ironically, the same amount of money that encompasses the delinquent mortgages in this nation right now as we do this broadcast tonight. These companies were saved, they were rescued, they double-dipped. They got $1.2 trillion from the Federal Reserve and the property, put the people into the streets, and now we have Freddie and Fannie that are going to rent the properties back to them. Morgan Stanley, $107.3 billion. Citigroup, an additional $99.5 billion. Bank of America, $91.4 billion. That just is the beginning of the list. Of the $1.2 trillion, over half of them were foreign institutions, which brings us to the crisis of 2011. The next crisis, the real crisis, the crisis of reality. All this failure has been shifted from private ownership to the citizens and the governments of the world. The downgrades are here. They're not downgrading the too big to fail. They're downgrading you. They're downgrading the United States of America. They're going to be downgrading France and Germany and Italy and you name it. But they're not downgrading private corporations. They're downgrading people. And the people are going to be asked to pay for the failure of these oh-so-select few. All right, there's our situation where we're at. Bob Chapman of the International Forecaster, I put his site in, his link into the chat room several times, and I'll also have it up on the website later. For those of you who don't know him, then you are brand new to this genre because he is a fixture in alternative media, plain and simple. Bob Chapman, welcome to the program. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
Well, thank you very much. And your coverage of the hijinks of the Federal Reserve are right on the money. And I think the appalling part about it is, number one, that they had the temerity to do it. Number two, they lied about it. Nobody in Congress is talking about it. And nobody seems to care. Of course, Congress probably 90-95% of the people in there are paid off. They do that through campaign contributions and also through lobbying and many other ways. And
Sure.
so we're at a standstill. Nobody seems to care except for a handful of people. And I don't think the American public really understands. And if they do, they say, gee, what can I do about that? And, of course, they go to their congressman, some of them, and the congressman sends them a form letter and says, I'm looking into it, and maybe I can do something about it. And that's the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah, matter of fact, I have several of those form letters that you described. Bob, I also want to let you know that Warren Pollock, who you get, I didn't realize you guys have spoke in the past. He's on the air with me, too. He's my normal Monday night co-host. But he wanted to make sure I told you, thanks for getting him into gold when it was below $300 an ounce. And I promise that'll be the last gold question, unless you want to share information. Warren, welcome to the program as well.
Yeah, thanks, Bob, for getting me into gold at $278 an ounce in 2000.
Well, you're welcome, and I'm glad you did. And there weren't enough of you, but those that did have done extraordinarily well over the last 11 years.
Bob, I want to get, like I said in the intro, I've seen you at least 1,000 times, either on YouTube or listening live on internet radio, and you always get pinned into one topic, right? And I know your history. You have a broad history in this business, and you've been calling this debt destruction that's now global. You've been calling it for a long, long time. And so, here we sit on the verge of what I call, the crisis of reality. We have the European debt seeming to be unfixable, or at least there is no leadership that is going to come in and organize it into a way that is going to be survivable. I want to get your opinion on, what you've called in the past and where we're going from here on.
Bob, I'd also like you to talk about the fact whether or not we're at a juncture, another credit crisis, perhaps, or they're trying to stick save things once again here in the U.S. or in Europe in the next week or two.
Well, firstly, I wouldn't call what we're seeing now at this stage a credit crisis. It's a debt crisis worldwide. And in the United States, and now as well in Western Europe, they view the central bank, in our case Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank, and of course the Bank of England as well. And they have been increasing money and credit, and they seem to think that's the answer, and of course they know it isn't. And in fact, Mr. Bernanke and Mr. Boskin wrote a paper in 1988 saying that what they're doing right now does not work. And so you say to yourself, why do they do it? Well, they do it because they don't know what else to do. And they seem to be wanting to extend the problem in time, and so they don't have to face the music now and hope that maybe something might happen that they might be able to wiggle out of this, and they can blame it on. And if you look back in history, you'll find every time that something like this happened, they had another war.
Mm-hmm.
And so get ready, kids. That's what they're going for. And when they're going to pull the plug and start their wars, remains to be seen. I see they just concluded their so-called war in Libya, which was about Mr. Gaddafi not using a golden dinar. He refused to join AFRICOM, and so they decided to go in and take his 4 water aquifers, the best oil in the world, the second largest inventory of oil in the Middle East, $100 billion in sovereign funds that they've already stolen, and today they went in there trying to pull out 143.8 tons of gold.
Mm-hmm.
And so what it is an operation in grand theft. And so this is the kind of thing that they use in order to cover up what they're doing. We saw it in the Second World War. Everything that FDR did didn't work. Unemployment in 39 and 40 was 17.4% and 16.2%. It was still dreadful. It wasn't 37% like it was in 1933, but it was dreadful. So they had another war. And it's one of the things that got me started doing what I'm doing today, when I found out when I was working in counterintelligence from the very beginning that the Japanese diplomatic codes have been broken by both the United States and Great Britain, and they knew everything the Japanese were doing. So they invited them in and lined the ships up for them. So this is just a recent, within the last 100 years, example of what people in government are capable of. And so the situation in the Middle East is not good. They could have another war there. They could have it in Venezuela for Mr. Chavez demanding that they send him his gold, which they probably don't have. And but Europe is a sink pot. It's over. I told the German government a year and a half ago, it's going to cost you $4 trillion. They said, no, $1 trillion. Well, about 3 weeks ago, they said, we raised our figure to $3.5 trillion. And I said, mine's $4 to $6 trillion. And if they rescue these 6 miscreants on the edge of insolvency countries, then the solvent countries are all going to go bankrupt. Right. And the Germans have figured that out. And in March, in North Rhine-Westphalia, in Hamburg, they had an election, Mrs. Merkel's constituency, and the Christian Democratic Party, CDU, lost very big. And what the people said was, we do not want to bail out anybody else. Let's take our losses and walk away. And
Bob,
the politicians were what's that?
Let me ask you something on this topic, because this is fairly topical, and we've been talking about it on the program. Merkel and Sarkozy come out a week ago out of their meeting. The markets didn't hear Eurobond. This is what George Soros is pushing. This is what the powers that be want. They want to spread this debt from these sick and dying cancerous countries onto the nations that might pull out of this. And you're right. There's no political will for Merkel or Sarkozy to step up and bail out these big nations. Do you think it's a coordinated effort? You're talking about the powers that be with the ability and the wherewithal and the desire to wage war in order to hide their crime. Is the same wherewithal pressuring Europe to enslave the somewhat healthy nations with this debt load? And are we going to see coming up next, are we going to see an event that lets markets actually tumble in order to make the citizenry of Europe more malleable to the idea of whatever Jean-Claude Trichet comes out and says we need to do, which is a European bond?
Well, first of all, the German public will never accept the bond.
Right.
And the problem's insolvable. They all know it. It is a method of breaking countries that are solvent. And the reason why that's so easy is they're all exporting countries to one another. And in the last 3 months, we've seen a big fall off in manufacturing and GDP. And so I think they are probably headed toward, at best, a recession. And that's being reflected worldwide as well, China, India, and the United States not going to and haven't been doing as well recently. And it's going to get worse. And so, if you remember, Great Britain, France, and the United States forced Western Germany to accept Eastern Germany in a merger. They wanted to do that. But
I was living there when that occurred.
They exchanged the D-mark and the Reichsmark 1 to 1 when it should have been 20 to 1 or more.
Right.
And they hung that burden around Western Germany's neck for the last 20 years. And this is another kind of noose that they're trying to bring them down over there. And the same thing's happened in England. And the same thing is happening in America. So you say to yourself, well, why would they do such a thing? They do such a thing because they want the public of those countries to be on their knees financially and economically so that they can force them to accept world government. And that's what this is all about.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, if we just take their own words, I mentioned Trichet. He's been saying for 3 years we need financial global governance. You know, and even Merkel and Sarkozy came out with a plan that is going to reshape the governing body over the Eurozone. So I think that if we just take them at their own word, that is the trajectory we're on. For 3 years I've been listening to you, and you've been saying what's going to come next. And I think in a lot of times you're saying it's going to take longer than people want to hear. A lot of people think this, we're heading into this collapse immediately. Bob, we're 3.5 years in since the massive bailouts of 2008. The sovereign debt is literally destroying nations and leading to bona fide civil unrest, violent civil unrest in Europe, soon to come here. What is your projection now going forward? I mean, do you see this escalating, this accelerating? Will it be right into a war moment, or are we going to have a social breakdown in the Western countries?
Well, I think that breakdown is taking place. You have seen the examples of recent demonstrations in Greece, Spain, and now England, which is very violent, inasmuch as a lot of people were involved in burning places down and robbing them.
Yeah.
And it got so bad because the police stood down that the public got together in large groups and apprehended the malefactors and held them for the police. And so those are signs of social unrest, of course, and they do lead sometimes to worse situations. And knowing what we can, or at least I see in the future, it's going to get worse. And I also think it's not going to be only in Europe and England, but the United States in particular. Whether other nations get involved in that remains to be seen. So, yes, there's going to be social, political unrest. There's also going to be more and more unemployment. Absolutely nothing is being done to ameliorate the problems of the working public, and the only thing that's been saved so far are banks, financial institutions of all kinds, transnational corporations, and these are the people who control the Federal Reserve, directly and indirectly. And nothing has been done to help the people, except if you call guaranteeing loans to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, or $16.1 trillion spread out between the United States and Europe. And so it is a very, very terse situation. Yes, it will become worse. Yes, it will turn into demonstrations of violence in America. But I certainly can't give you any timing. And I don't know what the exact catalyst is going to be, but it's coming because unemployment is going to get worse. You cited earlier, a third of the people in the country are on food stamps. Then you have Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. And that's a terrible situation. And nothing has been being done to remedy it.
Let's not forget, we've been eased into the word austerity in this country, and now with our debt ceiling increase debacle, we've been given the ultimate tool to implement austerity to those, in some cases it's going to be the 47 million families on food stamps. This super Congress that waters down our representative government even more. 535 members is too many decision makers. We have to whittle it down to 12. The same thing we see happening in Europe. They got to whittle it down to just a few heads of state to determine the financial future of all the Eurozone. All right, guys, hang tight. We got 215 people in the chat room right now, 100 watching on JTV. We're going to be right back with Bob Chapman and a very silent Warren Pollock tonight. We're going to do this commercial break. It's our only one. Hang around, 4 minutes long. We'll be right back with Bob Chapman and more Wide Awake Radio right after this. All right, guys, welcome back to Wide Awake Radio. I'm Charlie McGrath, your host. My website's wideawakenews.com. You can get into the chat there. We have over 200 people in there right now, over 100 on JTV. Bob Chapman is our guest, as well as Warren Pollock. Bob Chapman is the founder of the International Forecaster. If you haven't checked this site out, I'm sure everybody listening to me has, but if you haven't, I'll put the link into the room and have it up at the website as well. Bob, I've been dominating. I dominated you for the first half hour with questions. So what I want to do is on Monday nights, Warren is my co-host on here. I want to turn it over to Warren to ask you a few questions. And I also, during the break, I pulled some questions out of the chat room on a lot of the people had. So after Warren is done, I'll take some questions out of the chat for you.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah.
When we started talking around 2002, the big elephant in the room was 9/11.
A little louder, Warren.
Yeah, Bob. In 2002, when you and I started to talk, the elephant in the room was 9/11. I mean, it was clear that this event would have tremendous ramifications for people in the United States and worldwide. And from my perspective, since that time, every decision that's been made has been a relentless decision against the facts of the day and towards increased instability for the benefit of an elite few. And what's really amazing to me, as these events have unwound over these years, there's been a rising amount of propaganda and an incredible amount of denial. And I'm calling the present time period a time period of maximum denial. And we're ignoring Fukushima, multiple meltdowns. We're ignoring the supply chain issues of that event. We're ignoring the fact that the stock market has absolutely no valuation that makes any kind of sense given the fundamentals of the world economy. And the only place there is realization is in Middle East, North Africa, where people are having trouble putting bread on the table. And all of these people around the world are becoming unpersoned, and when they become so disenfranchised, so destitute, that's when they react. What will it take for Americans to start to react, and do we have to hit rock bottom before they realize anything? And then what's waiting for them? Is it the security state they've been building out for the last 10 years? What's the prognosis on island America?
Well, I think, from an intellectual viewpoint, you've covered it pretty well. The American public, half of them are functionally illiterate, and that's the truth in other countries, if not more. And so there's a lot of things that happen that they simply can't understand. And even if you explain it to them, they may or may not get it. And so we talk about denial, and there's a lot of it, particularly in the middle class, although I think they're starting to get the message that they're in the process of being destroyed. Mm-hmm. It's what made America, and other countries have followed the ideas of the evolution of the middle class in America, is what made it very successful. And so that's being pulled apart in order to destroy the success of what has transpired. So when and how will Americans wake up? It's very hard to say. We do know that they're disgruntled. They've seen deliberate attempts to deprive them of their good-paying jobs and sending those jobs to other countries. 11.7 million jobs have been lost in the last 11 years. 440,400 companies have left the country. They won't return unless tariffs are put on goods and services. Otherwise, the whole industrial structure within the next 5, maybe 10 years will be destroyed. And so people, as I said, are getting more frustrated. They don't really know exactly what to do about it. They go back to their congressman and they say, gee, look what's happening. Can you do something about that? And they get one of those form letters. And so there will be events along the way, and usually it's an empty belly that starts it, like you cited in the situation in the Middle East. And that's the basic reason for the institution of change. And it'll probably be the same thing in America. How far it is away is hard to say. How quickly the American economy is going to further deteriorate remains to be seen. As long as I have the creation of money and credit, as they call it, quantitative easing and stimulus, well, we can go sideways, probably -1 to -5 in GDP growth, perhaps over the next 4 or 5 years. But I think that's probably as long as they can extend it, because if they do what I think they're going to do with QE3, 3 years from now, we're going to have 50% inflation.
Right.
And they're going to have a hard time doing a QE4 or something like that. And
right,
so there's a law of diminishing returns on this.
Right. I spoke to a friend of mine today, Trader Mike, who used to trade on the floor of the American Stock Exchange, and he was saying that he could just feel QE3 in the air, and he feels that Obama's going to go back with his buddies Warren Buffett, and they're going to maybe have a token prosecution of Little Lord Blankenfein and Goldman Sachs, and they're going to try to restore normalcy. But he agrees that it's the law of it will be the law of diminishing returns. But what's so peculiar about this inflation is that the QE2 and 1 have caused what's called non-core inflation to happen. And that means that everything that you need for life support is becoming more expensive. And it's happening to people worldwide because all of the commodities are denominated in dollars. So I guess we could have, I can see this thing occurring in 2 weeks or 2 months or two years. Because right now, let's say the stock market's 10, what would happen if it was 6? What would happen to pension plans? What would happen to insurance companies? And what's happening to them now that the U.S. was downgraded 1 notch?
Well, that downgrading can be reversed. And the grading companies are controlled by Wall Street and banking. Always have been. Mm-hmm. And their ratings don't mean anything. Maybe they do to the business world, but to me they don't mean anything. And so that downgrade was created to make sure that this new Obama Enabling Act, which is a direct reflection of the Enabling Act of 1933 in Germany, put into place by one Adolf Hitler, is eventually they are going to turn this super Congress into a Politburo or a Star Chamber proceeding, which will lead to dictatorship. Sure. And that's what they're after.
So maybe
that's why the downgrading happened.
Maybe the next thing we need to be looking for is that Reichstag moment, that is going to...
Could be.
But to Warren's question, somewhat, you talked about this could extend out for years. I have a question. It seems to me, Bob, that everything that you're talking about, global financial government, global government for that matter, everything that needs to be in place is in place. Extraordinary wealth transfer has taken place to the tune of, we don't even know how much. It could be quadrillions of dollars. Do they really need to milk this along, or can they let it come apart now, tomorrow, a year from now, and then institute the lifeline, which will be the global governance? Or World War III, which culls the herd, and at the backside of it, you still have the opportunity for global governance.
Well, they can pull the plug anytime they want. The question is, when do they want to? And it's obvious it's not right now. They've had plenty of opportunity to have their extension if they wanted it. If they didn't want extension of what they're doing, they could have terminated the rescue of government and Wall Street. And they're still not out of the woods because they're all keeping two sets of books, which has been legalized by the U.S. and European governments, as well as the Bank for International Settlements and the International Accounting Organization, the FASB. And so they can do what they want to do when they want to do it, but they don't want to get caught doing it. That's why it's easy to have a war. And then they can get rid of excess population, which they call useless eaters, like the people they're trying to exterminate with the cuts in Social Security and Medicare that are on their way. And that situation will get worse and worse. And so in that theater, that's part of what they're up to. They're going to continue to call this austerity when in fact there is none. The austerity doesn't exist. The reductions other than Social Security and Medicare are all reductions of gains in spending for the next 10 years. And so with that said, there's no change. And 95% of Congress is in on it. Yeah. And they could have gotten a debt extension arrangement quickly. 15, 20 minutes. That's it. But they weren't after that. They wanted to chop up Social Security and Medicare and at the same time put in the Obama Enabling Act. People don't know what they're up to. Even the smarties on Wall Street don't get it. And I spent almost 30 years on Wall Street, and I own my own firm. So I know all about that business. And so they will continue doing what they're doing. They'll probably have false flag events. I don't know as yet when or what kind of events. Well, they may crank up another war. A good excuse would be to go after Mr. Chavez, who was dying, and because he asked for his gold, and he got rid of his dollars.
That's
so he must be evil. He's probably a terrorist, and he's a communist. So
yeah, 99 tons held between J.P. Morgan and the Bank of England, and he does want it back. So I think we'll see him go the way of Libya, of Gaddafi. Gaddafi, who Tony Blair put his arm around and told us he was a partner on the war on terror. Condoleezza Rice paid a state visit in 2008, and we spent, as of reports today, $800 million U.S. taxpayer money that we don't have. We had to borrow 40 cents of every dollar in order to go in and support 8,000 Saudis. And the mainstream media, all over the news last night, Bob, I don't know if you caught this, but on CNN they talked about the Libyan uprising. And it's almost, if it wasn't people dying, it would be a bad joke. There's no the uprising in footnote funded by America and 8,000 sorties from some of the most powerful militaries on the planet brought you the end of the Gaddafi regime. So where the next shoe will drop. I don't think we have to look too far. I mean, we can see what's going on with the rhetoric being built up against Syria. NATO coming out saying that we need to have strong worded sanctions against Syria. You see Russia coming into the mix saying you better back off of Iran and Syria. So it's very obvious when you point it out like that, Bob, that the end of it is going to be a war. But I want to get your opinion on what kind of war Are we talking about a never-ending, expanding empire? These little pockets of engagement around the planet, where hundreds of thousands of nationals die, but the American death toll is a couple thousand a year? Or are you talking about, all right, it's time to clear the books, we need a big one? No more will an Iraq do or a Afghanistan for a decade. We need World War III.
Well, I think it could very well be a combination of either or both. I think a large war could be started by going into Iran, but so far they haven't done that, and everybody who predicted it has been wrong. I said they wouldn't until they had a very good reason, and they don't have that reason yet. So it's not going to happen immediately. And then we're talking about as you put them, continual wars. It reminds me of Micken saying, perpetual wars for perpetual peace. And that's what they're up to.
Yeah, it truly is a brave new world, isn't it, Bob?
The world hasn't changed much. All you have to do is read history. It's all there.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, we're rapidly running out of
over and over again.
We're rapidly running out of time. I want to make sure that I give you the opportunity to talk about the international forecaster before I give you some of these questions from the chat room. You sent me a copy of it, and it's packed with information. I have no clue how you write this much, because you put this out weekly, right? Bi-weekly.
Twice a week.
I have no clue how you. I mean, this thing's 40 pages long. And Warren said, when he was a subscriber to it, that sometimes it would come out 70 or 80 pages long. I have no idea how you find the time to sit there and put all this info out. But tell us how we can get it and what goes into it. What kind of research and experience?
Well, it's widely spread publications all over the world, and a lot of experience. I've lived in 20 or 30 countries, speak several languages, so I get a one-up on most of the journalists, etc. And I'm able to simply put things together so people can understand them. Sometimes things that are very complex. But the forecaster is about business, finance, economics, social and political issues all over the world. We publish on Wednesday and Saturday. It runs around 40 pages each time. And we have a hard copy that goes out twice a month for those who are not on the Internet. And everything you need to know every week is in that publication. We have people who want to subscribe. They can email us, or they can go to our site. We have two sites. The first one, theinternationalforecaster.com. Theinternational forecaster.com. The other site is intforecaster.com. www.intforecaster.com. And for those of you who would like to ask a question, we answer everyone. And or a copy of either, or would like a copy of our latest report on gold and silver shares, they can email us at Bob, B-O-B, at intforecaster.com. Bob at intforecaster.com. You can also call toll-free 877-479-8178. That's 877-479-8178. You can get a free introductory copy, or they have a special offer there for a free 1-year subscription. And if you'd like to get a free 1-year subscription, the deal that they're offering there is terrific, so I would take advantage of it.
Here's the deal, Bob. As you're talking in the chat room, people are dumping the links in there as you're saying them, And there's a ton of people that's in this chat room right now that subscribe to you. So hopefully we can reach some listeners that aren't subscribed to you. Guys, it's a ton of information. I mean, I think I could probably do a radio show, a week's worth of radio shows easily in one volume of information that comes out of there. Not a lot of time left. I do want to try to get to a couple of these questions that came out of the chat room, Bob. So I'm just going to shotgun these at you. Here we see the latest news. Bank of America looks like we could be seeing another need for rescue. We're not only here in the U.S., where we're seeing a lot of foreign banks in Europe that could cause another a bank run or a banking crisis. Do you predict any kind of bank holiday in the near future because of the debt problems going on around the globe?
Oh, it'll come eventually, but I can't time that, and I don't think anybody else can either. I keep on seeing these projections, and they always turn out wrong. And a lot of these people who are making projections have absolutely no background in the subject at all. They're just freewheeling, and the public has to suffer because they're wrong most of the time.
Hey, Bob, could I sneak in a question about the 2012 election? Is it just a dog and pony show at this point in the game?
Well, you have Bachman and Romney, and they're exchanging fire with and on each other. Perry's another situation. Perry has been to the Bilderberger meeting twice, and he is trying to neutralize and destroy Ron Paul. That's his job, not to get elected president. His associates are certainly people I wouldn't have anything to do with, and his background is disgusting.
So the Republicans are just trying to get Ron Paul out of the picture, and then it's obvious that the Democrats, Obama is controlled by someone else. He's just a non-player.
They all do what they're told, except Ron Paul. And were
right.
Dennis Kucinich to run, well, they wouldn't be able to control him either.
He's never going to get the financial backing. Ron Paul, I love him. He was on the ballot in Montana in 2008. I voted for him. But, I mean, you know, we know the truth. If you don't have the money players behind you, the financial masters, if they haven't picked you, you're not going anywhere. You can be a relief valve. You can be a mouthpiece for the truth movement, but you're certainly not going to get elected to president. We're almost out of time. I want to ask you this because it came up over and over again. What should people do to prepare, and I'm assuming this is on the financial side of things, are you still recommending your precious metals?
Well, first of all, dehydrated and freeze-dried foods, because you never know when you're going to be out of work. That to be accompanied by a water filter, something to defend your family with, then gold and silver coins, shares. I don't see any place else to go. I've been dead right for years, and I guess I'm a very fortunate person. And you got to stay that way. Gold and silver are going to go to momentous heights, and this is just the beginning. We just finished phase 1. We'll probably have 4 or 5 phases. Who knows where it's all going to end up? Nobody does.
Bob, I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate you coming on here, giving it like it is, not trying to hype everybody into thinking we're going into Mad Max tomorrow. That's one of the reasons why you are a fixture in alternative media. People turn to you for your knowledge. Bob Chapman, the international forecaster, welcome back anytime. Warren Pollock, thank you for joining me tonight. Guys, stay tuned for Jeff Rintz if you're staying here. If you want to follow me over to JTV, I'll be doing another little program afterward just to take some more questions. Again, Bob Chapman, thank you very much. You're welcome back anytime you want. Have a great night, guys. Peace.